Today, I'm going to talk about resources for getting started as a software freelancer. This is not an easy thing to do, being a freelancer. It has a lot of complications. It has a lot of insecurity. It can be kind of terrifying at times. If you want to do that, or if more likely you want to know how to do it if it turns out that you have to do it because permanent employment isn't an option for a period of time, then stick around and I will tell you what I know with plenty of caveats. If you don't want to try to play that game, then I understand, and I wish you all the best with normal job hunts. Hi, this is the Internet of Bugs. My name is Carl, and here we go talking about software freelancing. This is not a topic that I initially thought would be a good topic for this channel. But after my Devin video and some comments I made about what Devin should have done to take care of the Upwork job, I had several people that reached out and said they wanted more information on freelancing. So this is more information on freelancing. So caveats first. First off, I got into freelancing fortuitously. I had some advantages. So the way that it happened to me is not necessarily going to be the way that anyone's going to be able to do that. So to some extent, take what I'm going to say with a grain of salt, because I have a background, I'll explain in a bit, but I have a background that's probably different than most of you. Second thing is, I'm only going to be talking about the US market. I'm not familiar with laws or whatever in other places, so I don't know to what extent this is going to apply. I'm not really going to be giving you direct advice. I'm just going to be giving you some resources that you can look at. This is going to be books about freelancing and the kinds of things you need to know about freelancing, but not the programming part. I'm assuming that you kind of know what kind of programming you're going to be doing, and if not, you don't need to be freelancing in that area. So this is just about the freelancing part. So my experience briefly, I started my career working as a consultant, getting sent by companies into client sites to do programming and network creation and network configuration and hookups and that kind of thing. So I got a lot of experience seeing the business, watching, going on sales calls with salespeople, watching myself get sold. That doesn't sound right, but that's effectively what was happening. And so I learned a lot about it there. The second thing that happened to me is that when I moved to Austin, I was working for a consulting company that was owned by a recruiting company. And that recruiting company, for various reasons, kind of imploded. And a lot of the people that had been recruiters there ended up getting scattered around the area. And I still know most of them. I got to know a lot of them while I was there. And so I have a lot of contacts in the Austin area where I live that are folks that I have known for a long time at this point who are not in the programming space, but are in the human resources space and the recruiting space. So I have a good source of leads and a good source of folks that ask me for information, and then I can help them with stuff, and I can talk to their clients and that kind of thing. Without that kind of a network, freelancing is a whole lot harder. So I'm going to talk a little bit about building that network, but it's going to probably be harder for people that don't have the specific experiences that I have of getting to know a bunch of recruiters and spending time being paid as an employee of a consulting company and learning the business that way. So first off, let me kind of break up the freelancing space for you a little bit. So there are a couple of different buckets. There's what I call staff augmentation, and there's project-based stuff. Staff augmentation is when effectively it's just like an employee, except you're paid as a contractor. So taxes are different, finances are different, other stuff like that is different. But you still show up like every other employee. You still sit in a desk like every other employee, or you turn in check in code like every other employee if you work from home. Getting a job as a staff augmenting freelancer is pretty much exactly the same as getting a job as an actual employee. It's just you're paid different and you don't get benefits. So I'm not really going to be talking about that, because the process for that is the same process as getting a job. And hopefully you've spent some time understanding that already. And I've got a couple of videos about that already. So what I'm going to be talking about is the other kind of freelancing, which is basically project-based stuff. So when there's a client who needs a particular thing built, and then a team gets put together, or sometimes it's just one person gets brought in to build that thing, and then the expectation is that when that thing is done, then that team will disband, and some of them might get together and try to do a different thing, but there's not going to be a continuation once that project is done. So you kind of know what your end date is. That can be terrifying to some people. It can be useful to other people. It just kind of depends on your temperament. Being part of a team means there are certain things that I'm going to talk about today that you don't necessarily have to know, but I'm going to go ahead and walk you through all of the different things. And so hopefully you'll be able to figure out what's relevant to you and what isn't. If you're going to be part of a group of people that are doing a project, there's a decent chance, unless you've been doing this a long time, that you're going to end up subcontracting. So basically, there's going to be a company. That company is bringing on a bunch of contract developers to go and do a project. And then once that project is done, that group is going to disband. This is, again, very much like being an employee, except you're interviewing for and becoming an employee of the contracting company, not an employee of the end client. It's not a bad thing. I've done a lot of subcontracting work. It's generally good work. It can be a little bit annoying because you've got the client who wants one thing and your contracting company wants a different thing, but it's not the end of the world. But again, the process of getting that kind of job is more standard kind of, resume interview process kind of thing. So I'm not going to be talking about that so much. Next thing I want to talk about is sites like Upwork and Fiverr and those kinds of things, which is kind of where we got here because that was the task that the Devon AI was supposed to have been able to do. Here's my take on that. Those kinds of sites tend to be very low margin. So the competition in those sites is very much just on price. And a lot of times the people that want the job to get done and that are choosing who's going to do the job is largely just going to be like, okay, here's the cheapest one. I'm just going to go with that. That's not a healthy way of having a business. Unless you live in a really, really low cost of living area, then there are probably going to be people that are going to be able to come in cheaper than you, and it's going to be really hard for you to make a living in that kind of world, with one exception. It is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible for you to do Fiverr or Upwork jobs, get to know the client that you're working with, do a good job, and then have them come directly to you for future work that they need done without going through the normal bidding process and without having to compete on price with everybody else, and have that client be potentially willing to pay you more because they've worked with you before and they know you're going to do a good job. If you can convert Upwork or Fiverr clients to long-term clients that you can raise prices on, then it might have been worth it to do the Upwork and the Fiverr stuff early, assuming it doesn't take you too many of those that you do basically at a loss before you get to the point where you've got some long-term clients. So it is a strategy. I don't recommend it, but if you don't have anything else to do, it might be something you can try. But focus on trying to convert those into longer-term things. Don't focus on trying to turn over Fiverr or Upwork gigs as fast as you can, because at least in my experience, you'll get really burned out that way, and it's not a good way to make a living. It's incredibly stressful. Okay, so starting off, getting jobs as a freelancer when you're not going through the normal kind of interview process, and you're not doing the interviewing, and you're not doing the resumes and all that kind of stuff, like the other stuff, is basically about selling yourself. It's the same kind of process as if you were selling a product or you were selling an enterprise software service or that kind of thing. I am assuming that you're not going to be doing a lot of direct sales. I'll explain in a little bit, but if it turns out that people really want to cold call companies and really want to go into companies and say, hey, you need to bring me on to do a project, then there's a whole different set of books for that. I've done that. It's not fun, but I can talk about the other set of books for cold calling into companies and trying to sell yourself or trying to sell a product. But what I'm going to be focusing on here is when you have a lead, you've gotten an idea from somebody that there's a group that's getting put together in order to do a project. Either that came from a Fiverr or an Upwork or some other kind of project. It comes from somebody that you know. This is basically once you know that there's somebody who wants to put together a project, then what you do from there. The way that starts, unfortunately, the way you can have a good freelance business now is to have started a long time ago, unfortunately. So here are a couple of books. So this book is called Never Eat Alone. It's a bit of an exaggeration. And this book is called Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. And both of these are books about, and I'll put the links to all of these in the show notes so you don't need to worry about writing down the titles at the moment. These are both books about creating networking, about getting to know people and getting people to know you, so that when those people hear about the kinds of business that you do, that they will let you know or they will recommend you and that you'll get information that way. These are very useful. I mean, I've had this book a very long time. It's been through a whole lot. I don't know if you can tell, but I've read the heck out of this book, but they're not quick. It's a time-consuming process. You have to get to know people and build up stuff over time. And how well your network is going to work is largely going to be a function of how often the people that you network with know of jobs or projects or things that are happening that you might be able to be associated with. So it's not a quick thing. Even if you're not planning on doing freelancing anytime soon, it's still worth building a network. It will still help you a lot in your future career. So these books, especially the Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. Next book I'm going to bring out, this is called Free Agent Nation. Now, this is not a how-to book, although the future of working for yourself makes it sound more like a how-to book than it is. It is a very good book, but it's more about the dynamics, the business dynamics of the freelancing world, not so much the how to be a freelancer yourself, but about why to be a freelancer and how more and more people are being freelancers and that kind of thing. It's very good. It's very interesting. It's kind of academic. So it's not a follow the instructions in this book to be a freelancer. It's a read this book to understand how freelancing works as part of the economy. I definitely recommend it, but it's not a here's how you be a freelancer book. All right, so this is Getting Started in Consulting and Flawless Consulting. The Getting Started in is okay. Both of these books deal more with the paperwork parts of consulting, the like structures and those kinds of things. This Flawless Consulting book, I have, I think, a workbook from this. This is the second edition. I have a copy of the first edition. I've been reading different editions of this for quite a while. It's a really good book. The Getting Started in Consulting is, you'll get through it faster. It's not as deep, but it's more directly how-to kind of thing. Both of these are decent books. Look through them, see what feels like it's at the level that you are, and then pick one or both of them. This is representative of a class of books. You're going to want some kind of book that's about the finances as a freelancer. It's not as simple as it is when you're an employee. They don't just hand you everything and there are extra taxes you have to be responsible for and that kind of thing. So I will go ahead and put a link to this one, but it doesn't really matter this one. You need one that's current and you need one that's specific to the authority that's taxing you, that kind of thing. So you need to be able to learn something about that. I have an accountant. I think that anybody who does freelancing for very long ought to get one, but it's not necessarily a thing you need to do before you actually ever start freelancing. It's a thing you can kind of do later. These two books are about project management, and they're about for the most part, the not agile part of project management. If you saw one of my other videos, I'll link to it. I'm not a big fan of agile in many ways. If people want, I will end up having a lot more to say about project management. This book, this Effective Project Management, you can get a copy of it. I think it's on like the 7th edition right now. It's not a great book. It's way more complicated than you're probably going to need to just be a freelancer, right? It talks a lot about having big teams and all that kind of stuff that you're not going to be able to do or want to do for a very long time. So it's really overkill for what you want to do. And it's silly, at least this edition. I think probably the newer editions are the same way. It's silly in the context of it talks about project management in the absence of software. which just doesn't make any sense to me at all, but it's a book you can get. This book, which I prefer, I love this book. This is the book that I learned project management from in 1990, four or something? 1994. This book is a book on how to manage projects, and it's a book on how to use Microsoft Project, which is software that manages projects. It's a really old version of Project, but the core of Microsoft Project hasn't changed that much. And so this book basically talks to you about a particular facet of project management, and then it shows you how to do it in the software. This book basically tells you about how to do a project management and doesn't talk about the software at all, which is crazy because these days everybody uses some kind of software. Otherwise, why would you bother? So if this is all you can find, there's stuff in project management that you can learn about. You might be better off just using tutorials on the actual project software. Like I said, I'll have more. If people want, there'll be more information about how to use the project management software specifically for freelancing. The question a lot of people are going to want to know is why bother? And the answer is because many times in freelancing, and this is true both for projects that you're working on that you got through leads and anything that you're doing that was like a Fiverr or a Upwork or that kind of thing, people want estimates. Before they will let you start, most of the time, you have to give them, this is the plan of what I'm going to do, this is how long it's going to take, and this is how much it's going to cost. There are conversations you can have later, and the other consulting books, I will talk about that. Basically, when you've said, okay, this is what it's going to cost, and then you start the project, and then they change their mind, that means the price needs to go up, or at least the price needs to change. So there's a whole process for figuring out when the customer wants to change something after you've started, how the price should change to reflect that. But you need to start almost always with some kind of project plan that helps you estimate how much it's going to cost so you know what to bid to start with. And if you just throw a number out, a lot of times, especially if you end up getting the job, it's going to turn out that you bid too low. So having an understanding of how to use this kind of tool to be able to help you estimate how long a project is going to take so you know what to bid on it, so you can either get it or not get it if you're not going to be able to make any money off of it, is a really useful kind of thing. Just to throw this out there. So there's this belief that the project plans, the Gantt charts, those kinds of things, I'll put up a picture of a Gantt chart, is anti-Agile. And in fact, you can manage Agile projects using Microsoft Project. Agile is built not to be done that way, but it's actually kind of useful to do it that way. Agile is very much, we don't want to talk about how much the whole thing is going to cost. We don't want to talk about what the end result is really going to be. We want to just talk about 2 weeks at a time sprint kind of things. And that's great work if you can get it in theory. But most people, in my experience at least, they want to know how much money they're going to spend on a thing before they let you start and before they give you any money at all. I don't think that trying to be a freelancer in the absence of some kind of tool that helps you estimate things makes any sense at all. And I think it's a bad idea. Anyway, if you want more information about project planning and how I do it and how I do it for freelancing and that kind of thing, let me know. That's a whole more complicated series of videos than just recommending this book. This book is called Back of the Napkin. It's a really great book. I'll see if I can find some pages from it and put them up. But it's a book about how to take an idea and how to distill it down to the kind of thing that you can draw on a little piece of paper to explain things to a client. And you wouldn't think that this would be a really important skill for consulting. It's been invaluable. I picked up this book kind of on a whim. I did not expect it to be useful. It was. It's incredibly useful. And being able to sit down with a client or a prospective client and hear them say, this is what I want, and be able to sketch out really quick, a flow chart or a org chart or a, whatever. There's lots of different examples in this book. Has been really, really useful to me in being able to get ideas across. So believe it or not, I'm going to call this Back of the Napkin book an important, useful book for consulting. And the last book, and again, I don't have the jacket on this, so sorry about that, is called We Got Fired. So this is by the same guy that wrote Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty. This is more a inspirational book. It's for those of you that are bummed or depressed or unemployed or looking to be out of school and not sure what you're going to do. This is a book about people who had jobs fail. They got fired, something went wrong, business is closed, that kind of thing. And who turned out to have been, in their opinions at least, much better off than they would have been if they had stayed at the place that they wanted to stay. This is another survivor bias thing, right? So the people that got fired from a job and were miserable and never got any better than the rest of their lives don't write books. So just because the people in this book managed to make it happen doesn't mean it's easy and doesn't mean it happens for everybody. But it is possible, and people have done it. I've done it. I've been fired several times for various reasons, mostly disagreeing with how things ought to be done or how I thought things ought to be done. But this is a good book for saying, I'm currently unemployed. I'm currently looking for a job. I'm having trouble finding a job. Here are some good success stories of people that are in the situation that you're in. It is possible. And even if it doesn't look like it's possible, it can be. So this is a good kind of inspiration kind of book. So those are the resources I've got for now. If this video does well and people like it, then I will end up doing more freelancing videos. It doesn't exactly land in the Internet of Bugs kind of space, but if it's useful to people, I'm happy to help. So let me know. Let me know if you want to know more about project management and project estimation specifically, and hopefully I'll see you around. Don't forget that the internet is full of bugs. Anyone who says different is probably trying to sell you something. Let's be careful out there.